The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Okay, welcome to the Investigative Journal on this January 13th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. They also play my show at 11 a.m., and that's Pacific time, on First Amendment Radio if you can't catch it in the evenings. So you got two choices there. I hope you go to my Monday show. I interviewed Bert Krantz of the Alamo Ministry, and it's a story that you need to listen to. It shows you exactly how our freedoms of speech and religion are being stripped away from us. And then yesterday, I interviewed, and go to this story, Leo Zagami from Rome. And if you want to get an insider's view of how the Masonic Vatican operation really operates behind the scenes with the CIA, the Mossad, he's the man to go to. He's right there in Rome. All roads lead to Rome, and he gives us an insight that you don't get in other places. And I do that for one reason, and that is because you got to hear all sides of every story. And you got to listen to some of the things that Leo says about things he learned growing up in that Masonic world, and then coming out of it and trying to spread some idea of how it really operates. And he has a number of books out in Italian and English and Japanese, and you can go and try to find those on the internet. Okay, today, doing something a little different. It's going to be kind of a simulcasted broadcast, and let me explain. About 8 or 9 years ago, I did a segment. A lot of people were emailing me, and 8 or 9 years ago, things were a bit different. Not many people were catching on to the Vatican intrigue, so to speak. But this truck driver named Walt Stickel used to email me, and I with a number of them, and call me in on my show. And I decided at that point that wouldn't it be good to talk to people and give them a chance to speak more than just as a caller, where you ask questions and so forth. So I decided to start interviewing people like Walt, and he was one of my first, and I called it interviewing the common man or something like that, regarding these issues. And it was quite an interesting segment that I ran. And Walt was one of the first, gave me the idea to do it. So since then, it's 8 or 9 years ago, Walt has started his own website. He also has a radio broadcast, and now he wants to interview me. So that's what we're going to do today. Walt Stickel is going to interview me on his radio show, and I'm going to broadcast parts of it here, because his time frame is just a bit different. So what I'm going to do is broadcast most of what I say with Walt right here, following right now.
Recorded live. Greetings and good morning. This is the hour of the discernment on Wednesday, 2016. I'm sorry for the connection problems we've had the last 2 days, and I was trying to figure this out, and I think I've got the problem fixed there on this end. So with that, today, on Monday when Greg couldn't make it to the broadcast, we talked about Greg. I talked about Greg Szymanski and how instrumental and how I learned about the New World Order in Rome through in the Investigative Journal. And so it's kind of interesting that as one of his listeners, today I'm interviewing Greg Szymanski. And Greg has been at this a lot longer than I have, and has taken a lot more hits than I have. But with that, I want to welcome you to the broadcast, Greg.
Hey, that's great to be with you, Walt. We're just switching roles here, but it's the same old story. Go ahead.
Yes, and Greg, through the years, I think we come. The broadcast you had on from December 7th, that week there on December 7th,
right?
You broadcast. I want to kind of talk about that because one of the most two important resources. And I remember when you used to have Eric Phelps on your broadcast.
Yeah, of course.
It was. I was always. It was very, very interesting. And I think as time grew, you like myself have dwelt into. We have got into history a little bit more, and then we come across F. Tupper Saucy. And F. Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, it's being read by York Glisman on Joggler 66, and he's doing a great job. But it's a book that you can't read it just once. It is a book that you can pick up, and you can pick up and read and start at any chapter after you've read the book. And also on this broadcast, the reason for this broadcast too, you see, is the main thing that Greg has come across in his research is when we're up against a whole army of authors, radio broadcasts, and the mass media, especially the evangelicals, wanting to say that this the government is a Christian government, and I just want to mention Gregory A. Boyd. He's wrote a book, The Myth of a Christian Nation, and I think Tupper Saucy is he leads us and he takes us through step by step and showing us the real founding of America. And Greg, what was the first signs that you started realizing that there was something wrong with
Wrong with what?
The founders of America. In other words, we have a myth here that the founders were Christian. And
well,
it's just nuts.
Well, here's the point. The farther, looking at it from an investigator's point of view, it's hard enough to figure out let's just use a case of, let's say you're investigating a murder trial or a murder case. The colder 48 hours and you don't get any evidence, and it keeps getting harder to prove your point, to 100% assurance to people. So when you go back 200 years and you go back all the way through all of the history that has been misreported, things that, to the victor go the spoils, and also goes the way history is recorded. So we have this patriot group that constantly was saying, oh, let's go back to the founding fathers. And this was both anti-Vatican people and people who said the people that were talking about the Vatican were crazy. It was always going back to the founding fathers. And so I started to think to myself, and then you hear with what Hollywood does and what the news broadcasts do, the History Channel, and I started to say, well, where did this New World Order really begin? Was it after the founding fathers? And then when you start doing research, you realize that it started a long time before that. So once you start researching that, the stories, when I started to really think about it, was when I used to talk to Tupper Saucy before he died, and he was telling me how he began this research. And at that point, I was more of a journalist talking about daily affairs, talking about what the Vatican was doing in 1982, talking about what they're doing now. And with that, I had to start going back in time, and that takes a while. So 10 years ago, or 8 to 9, 10 years ago, Tupper Saucy was a vital person in my life who said, listen, look a little deeper. Start thinking in terms of this being a setup, this country being a setup, a cover. And, he presented facts that were very interesting and, in a sense, covered up in history. And I found one book that talked about this guy who could have been easily Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general, who they may have faked his death during this period of time. And I read that other book that Saucy had heard this from, and it made a lot of sense. And there's only one book I've been able to find that even talks about this. Now, that's not unusual when you're dealing with a secretive organization. When you're dealing with deception, they're not going to tell you what they are. They're not going to, it's easily recorded in history. You can believe what you want. But when you're starting to understand one, people today, many people will say the Vatican is not a Christian church. And that is very true. So let's go dig deeper. If they're not a Christian church, then why do our leaders today and the Vatican say they are? And why do they say they go back to the Founding Fathers? Because you have to take away that layer and understand that perhaps some of the Founding Fathers, the main ones like Franklin, Washington, and Jefferson and others, had a secret agenda. One, to tell the illiterate, poor workers in America one story of freedom in order to get the Vatican through the door into this country. And secondly, if you look at the Constitution of the United States, it's a perfectly great cover for those in power to usurp it. And you're seeing that every day today. The Constitution on its face. Now, I studied law. I went to law school. Everything you see in the Constitution is a beautiful theoretical document. But when you see it in practice, it doesn't function. Executive orders, these ideas that the Environmental Protection Agency, the FDA, all these groups can usurp our constitutional rights or bring an enemy like terror into our country, and all of a sudden you don't have the right to even your privacy in your own pocket. Just the other day, around January 1st, policemen in New York were just indiscriminately asking for people's IDs in the subways. They had more police presence in, Times Square for January 1st than people. Now, the point I'm trying to make is these people that began this country were not dumb. And the Jesuits have been doing this for centuries, if you look into their history. So I started to question the mainstream approach. The History Channel's look at the Founding Fathers. I started to question Eric Phelps's look at the Founding Fathers because of this. And, God knows, look, I have nothing against Eric at all. In fact, what I say is this: it doesn't matter who he is. It doesn't matter what side he's on. He knows who he works for, and that's fine. He has a right to do that in this country. But I found when I started to disagree with him on certain things, that he came out with, pretty much an attack on me, that I was basically a follower. Well, look, he attacked Tupper Saucy back in 2001, and that to me was a sign. Why was he doing that? All I ever said, and all Tupper Saucy ever said, and I talked to him, he said, look, all I wanted to do was get this information out on the table and put it side by side so people could make a decision. And he attacked me. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to make me look that I was a Jesuit shill. Now, why would he call out Tupper Saucy without evidence based on information that conflicted with his? Is there a hidden agenda there? Perhaps. So I said, people, look at that. Now, look, I probably have put Eric Phelps on my program more than anybody. And I respect a lot of the information he has. Now, put it this way, he's a veritable dictionary. I mean, I could never debate the man. I can't keep all that stuff in my head. I'm a journalist. I will just want people to hear the information. And I found it kind of strange that he would take up this cause quickly after Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, came out in 1999 to basically discredit it. And I said, why? This is not the way that people act when they're really searching for the truth. And so my point is to people, you can take Saucy's work, you can take what I say on the radio, you can take what Walt says, you can take what Eric says. You can take even what Bill Hicks, or who I call Alex Jones. I think they're one and the same. Now, people may disagree with me, but I hope he's Bill Hicks because I liked Bill as a comic way back when. Maybe I talked to him, and that would have been cool. But what I'm getting at is you, the listener, have to decide this stuff. And just like you have to decide whether you want to be a Christian or you want to be a Catholic or you want to be a Muslim or you want to be whatever, that's your choice. All you got to do is start reading and making a proper decision, not one based on what man tells you. You have to look deeper. And I say that if you do look deeper, if you look into your soul, you need to read the Bible. You need to read all the different books that were put out there of the occult. You need to look at the Quran and read that as well to see the similarities between that book and Catholicism. And man, when you start looking at this stuff, then you can make a proper choice, what master you really want to serve. Now, to be very clear, if you listen to some of the recent just little clips that people have taped and put on YouTube regarding some Vatican ceremonies with Pope Francis, you will clearly see in Latin, they tell you they worship Lucifer. They tell it to you. Now, what more proof is that, people? Just because it's in Latin doesn't mean it isn't the same message. They're telling you at their opening ceremony, and I can't remember exactly, maybe last year or so, they are praying to Lucifer. That, to me, is solid evidence. What do you think, Walt?
Well, Craig, I agree 100%.
Yeah. I mean, and you've seen it. Look, go back to your life, because I can go back to mine in 1982 when I was almost blown up by terrorism in Italy, and you can go to a UPI story dated May 20.
Recorded live.
Okay, I'm back. We got cut off.
That took the light off of the historical Antichrist.
Walt, I'm back.
And when I look at Washington, D.C., Greg, I didn't realize this until the Pope came over here the last time. I said, that building is a basilica. The capital of the United States, right in front of us, is a basilica. And they've deified George Washington, and he's in the rotunda. And this comes from Protestant sources and Catholic sources. George Washington died a Catholic. Now that is a Capitolium. It's right in front of us. It's right in front of us, and on the top of it, they put freedom. When you read chapter 22 and 23 of Tupper Saucy's book, he makes it so clear. And on the chapter, I believe it's chapter 22, Immaculate Conception, the internet, and I was reading that word by word. On December 2nd, they put it, freedom was, the molds for it were made in Rome. They were poured here in the States. But on December 2nd, 1863, right in the middle of the Civil War, with 3 lifts. They didn't have helicopters in those days. It took 3 lifts to put freedom on top of the Capitol. What's so significant about December 2nd, 1863? They give a 47-gun salute. A 47-gun salute. John Carroll had passed away 47 years prior. And I want to ask you this too, Craig. We've all heard Chris Pinto's The Hidden Faith of the Founding Fathers. But there's 3 hidden founding fathers that were put in with the icons, Adams and Jefferson and Franklin. There was 3 founders left out: John Carroll, Daniel Carroll, and Charles Carroll. And this is not an attack on Eric Phelps. I've learned this from you, Greg. We have to be journalists. My webpage, The Grand Design Exposed, has got the pieces up there. You put pieces together. But in Eric Phelps' 896-page book, with over 700 illustrations, the Carroll is mentioned one time, and that's the Carroll University in Ohio. He left the Carrolls out. And you got your comment on that, Greg?
Yeah, can you hear me, Walt? Can you hear me?
Just a second.
I think you muted me. I've been muted before.
You are unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't know how that happened.
There was a little connection problem here, and I got back on, so check it every now and then that I'm not muted. But
okay, that's what happened. But did you get the question I had?
Yeah, I got everything. I've been listening for a while, and the point is that's what his book says, and people can read that. And it's interesting that it was one of the first books out on this subject in 2001, and it's interesting that the first interview he ever gave was with the Spotlight, which most people will understand is a controlled opposition newspaper, was turned into the American Free Press, and I know that for a fact because I worked with them. So I started to say, that's fine if people want to read that, but they got to hear the other side of the story. And so the point of view of this is when I was speaking to Tupper about it, he said, all I said was if anybody disagrees with me, I will talk about it and listen to your point of view as well and make changes in my next book and maybe add certain things that people say. So it's an open forum, an open book. And he never had a chance to do that because during the years after that, he was working on some other things and never got a chance to do another second publication of Rulers of Evil. But so what I said on the air many times was put Eric's information alongside his, and then you decide what makes a lot of sense. And to me, what Saucy was saying made a lot of sense. And I would say to Phelps, why didn't you just talk about that stuff? And there was always this kind of categorical, it's not that guy's off base. Well, I don't think so. When you look at the history of where Washington, D.C. was placed on Carroll property, their influence in many different things that were going on at that time, they should have been founding fathers. And I think they weren't put in there basically to keep the heat off the Vatican having anything to do with forming this country for a reason, and a hidden reason. And I think people, if they're smart enough, they'll see it playing out before their very eyes today. Growing from one diocese, the Vatican is probably the second biggest landholder next to our government in this country. They own more stocks and bonds. You would not believe what they're involved in. They own, the Jesuits own controlling interest of the Bank of America. Now, if this is not a systematic takeover to turn this country into Catholic, which one day will be not even that, it's going to be a one world religion, then nothing, you can't overlook this stuff. And you got to use a little bit of common sense. One, you can't just categorically prove it. It happened 300 years ago or so. But use your common sense. Who's benefiting today from all this stuff? It isn't the American people and our freedoms. It is the two groups we're talking about. The Vatican working together with the policemen of the world, now the Roman army, the American military, and our government. That's who's benefiting here. And all of the elite people working with them, Ted Turner included, and the media, and you can add them to the mix. Those are the people benefiting from the lack of information, the systematic approach to keep it out of...
As I read and I haven't digested it completely. I'm still digesting chapter 24, the mark of Cain. But what I got out of it so far.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
A Protestant constitutional republic. What we got in 1776 was a universal constitutional republic. Now that we have a lot of freedoms in this country, and I'm thankful for the years that I have. I'm 71 years old, and I've had some, it's been a cakewalk. I've had a cakewalk, and I've had some freedoms and done things that some people in this world just dream of. And so, just a second, I got to let my dog in.
Okay.
Hey, come on, Sam. But the thing of it is And I put this out to the people, some younger man's. I have enough information, but I'm not a writer. But I'll tell you what needs to be done. It's not, nobody has done it. I call it the 200 years prior to 1776, starting with Henry VIII. I know this history, and a history flows like a river. It doesn't run uphill. It runs downhill. And if I'm appealing to some younger men or somebody that, I have an outline that it should, but it should start with Henry VIII to Bloody Mary to the reign of the golden years of Elizabeth and King James. The Bible is the King James Version, up until Charles I, the Civil War in England, and that a king lost his head, a Catholic king, because Charles I married a Catholic, and up to Charles, then to James II, with the Glorious Revolution and the writing of the Royal Declaration, and the only places that you will hear about the Royal Declaration is it's up on my website, and it's in the Catholic Encyclopedia. It is real. It's an oath that the king or queen swore before they took office, and it's solidly Protestant. And so, I awoke this morning, and the more sometimes I want to let this stuff down. I want to kind of back off and be like old Walt, go out and fly my radio controlled gliders and enjoy the Pacific Ocean here on the Oregon coast. I live in a beautiful place, but I can't let it go, because I understand this. The stronger my faith becomes, because you can see it. And Greg touched on this, but the key to this is Roman Catholicism. Is it Christian? Because they have completely what has happened, because this makes people angry. But the Constitution, the Jesuits were in on the writing of the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And this flares people up, because we have patriotism causes people to be blind to what is going on.
Let me give you an example, Walt, and this will maybe ease people's, when we go back to that writing and you say that, sure, many people are going to say, hey, he's off his rocker, or Greg's off his rocker. But let's go back to just 2000, the year 2000, right before 9/11. And before 9/11, this is a fact, you can trace the Patriot Act being written by a Jesuit lawyer at Georgetown University, a Jesuit lawyer named Van Diem. And so we have the Jesuits involved in writing the Patriot Act prior to 9/11. So what is so outlandish about saying that they had their hand in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence? And they had their hand in this kind of world that was going on then, where the elites were basically, look, I am convinced that there needs to be a look at how the American Revolution began, how it was instigated, why it was instigated. We hear in our, you go to college and you go, oh, it was the Boston Tea Party. That's what they want to do, make you just think it was something it wasn't. This orchestration of this war was very, very instrumental in the formation of this country, and the Jesuits needed to get France and England fighting against each other. And that's what Lorenzo Ricci did, I believe. That's why. Doesn't it make sense, folks? Think about Sun Tzu's Art of War. It was first translated into English by Jesuits. Ricci was behind that. They used many of those tactics to foment many revolutions during that period of time. And I did a research thing that's kind of interesting. Do a timeline of all these revolutions in Europe and America: French Revolution, Russian Revolution, Polish Revolution. There were many revolutions during this period of time. And I believe the Jesuits had their hand in every one of them, just like they have their hand in everything today. And if you don't believe me, think about this one priest. There's a Jesuit priest right now named Father Dal Oglio, O-G-L-I-O. It's a story that's amazing. He is one of these Jesuit spies working with the Syrians to make sure that this terrorist organization functions the way the West wants it to. He is one of those guys, and when you check that name out in his story, you will see they're still doing the same thing. And then you can just look at the way you can go to all of our politicians who have been trained at Jesuit schools. Their heroes are all these Jesuit priests. And it's just amazing. People will not realize who controls this country and for what reason. Now, what can you do about it? Well, I've come first. I felt that, I look at people that want to instigate revolt and violence as only people that are aiding their cause. I look at people that tell people, oh, go hide away in the woods and don't deal with these people. I think they're aiding their cause. The first thing you can do is you can start telling people who want to listen about this stuff. You have an obligation to do that. And I think that obligation rings true both in the secular world, where you want to get at the truth, and in the Bible. I think the Bible states somewhere that Jesus said, go spread my word to everyone that wants to listen. That is your obligation as a Christian. And you can't just close your mind and say, oh, I don't want to talk about this stuff and I'll pray by myself in my room. No. You're just as responsible as they are then. So you need to talk about it. And Walt, you have done that. And I commend you for it. I remember when you first started talking to me 10 years ago, and now look at what you've done. And what happens is it's that same thing Tupper Saucy told me. Because I asked him that question. I said, Tupper, what do I do? I'm confused. I don't know what to do anymore. And he said, do this. Just make yourself available. If people want to listen, tell them. If they don't. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, isn't it better to talk to one person that will listen, that'll spread it to 100, than to talk to 100 that have closed ears? And he made sense. And so that's what his book's all about. Many people will close that book and never read it. That's their problem. But maybe you can open up one person's mind that will open up 100 others. And that's the only thing we can do. Now, we can take this one step farther. We can create an organization. It doesn't have to be written on paper. It doesn't have to be out there in front of Washington, D.C. It's a silent organization of people who understand this, that want to communicate together. And this, to me, would be more powerful than anything. And if you're thinking about slowing them down, God never had a time frame on when the end of the world is. And why? Because I think he's giving everyone an opportunity, even people who work for Lucifer, the chance to come over to his side. So if we can delay it, I don't think there's anything the Bible says we shouldn't try. I looked at every generation for the past. I can tell you that there are these fake evangelists out there, the ones who put the hook 'em horn sign on all the time when they're on the TV. And then if you go back in history, you'll look. Every generation said it was the end of the world. The world still's going on, and the Bible never says when. So I choose to leave that up to God. And in the time I'm here, the things he's given me to understand, I'd like to just tell them, and I use a radio broadcast to do it. I'm not very good at going into a grocery store unless somebody I know or wants to talk about this subject and sit there and preach this stuff to people in line. That's not my purpose. There are other groups out there that do it quite well. Christians have that responsibility. I told you the Tony Alamo Ministry does it, and they are taking that and showing people, putting out brochures, things they feel that's important. And I agree with them. Somebody has to do it. But it's done in many different ways. And that's why we're all a bit different. But we all share the same thing, that is looking for this one truth. Why has this happened to us? Why is this world moving in that old world order direction with a one world government, which will be Luciferian, a one world religion, which will be Luciferian? And when will God step in? That is really what we're looking at here. And maybe you have some thoughts, Walt.
Well, Greg, you're talking about spreading the gospel, spreading the truth.
Exactly.
And the only answer is, like Tupper Saucy said, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit. I liked what he said. He says, rulers of evil. I'm thankful for the rulers of evil that rule these evil people, because the world, we can see this, especially in America, the moral decay of America. And this is all brought on. This is not by accident. And the reason the Bible is such a hated book, it exposes Rome. It exposes Mystery Babylon. And Mystery Babylon was here before Rome. It was just a baton that was handed off to Rome. But this comes all the way from, like in Tupper Saucy's book, the mark of Cain.
Yeah, that's go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I said, yeah, that's an important story to look at different interpretations. But you were going to go ahead, so go ahead and tell me what you were going to say.
Well, I'll tell you, and this has only happened the last 2-3 weeks, because and we talked on off air briefly. There's a time that sometimes this makes you angry when you see how, because in other words, once you see the pieces, all you have to do is put the pieces together, and it paints a vivid picture who's behind this.
Yeah, and I can say this, when I first, years ago, I used to get angry. I don't any longer. And the reason is because I've been dealing with it for so long. And you have to come to a position where you're not accepting it, but you're realizing that God had his hand in this. And then at that point, you realize that even though these, like you said, rulers of evil, ruling evil people, are here for a reason, and that gives you the strength to deal with them, to be able to go to them. The one thing that is mystifying to me is when I changed my tune, instead of confronting these people, but just admitting, you have a right to be here. It doesn't matter who you work with. People will figure it out just by your deeds. All I want to do is talk to you. All I want to do is share what I have to say. Oh boy, they don't know how to deal with it because they want to bring you into conflict. They want to bring you into this arena where you argue and then they win because they have more listeners. They have more military. They have more. One of the biggest ploys in the world is if you look at good people. And I asked Tupper Saucy about this. I said, how come there's the heroes of this world, the real heroes, are never talked about? And the reason is many people have not. They've taken up this stance of conflict against them, against these people, and all they do is turn it around and say, listen, we love God. We love our country. You are the hated one. And that's what they do to a lot of people. And so you never hear about them. But the more that people understand this, the more we allow, in a sense, God to take care of the bigger problem and us to just spread the word, the simpler it is to live in this world. And you can actually live happy alongside these people. That's the point I'm at. Many people disagree with me on that. But I say you have no other choice. It wasn't you who created this to begin with. And to me, it explains what evil is all about. And I've asked people, what is evil? Oh, and their simplistic definition of it is just, and then they're mystified. Well, I don't want to love a God that created this stuff. They have no idea what the history is of this world. You can't And how can you make a decision to be with God or not if you don't understand that? And I said this very well. I think these people, these occult people, understand both sides, and they've made a decision. I want to be with Lucifer, and I want money. I want power. I don't care. That's fine. You made your decision, but you failed to, you will understand one thing. You will never see God again. So you make your choice. And that is the point here. And I've seen good people that had a lot of money come to the other side. And that's what I think the Bible talks about. Give them a chance. Even though they, what better way to say it? Even though they've genocided so many people. I don't know, Walt, I'm not really a preacher, but you can't help but go to the words that I just said, and I'm sure they've been said before by people who are more well-read in the Bible than I am. But you can't make any other conclusion if you read everything that is in history that's been covered up, and you read the spiritual works of everything. It all boils down to this. And that's why they want total control over you. So you don't think anymore. So you're just a slave in their respect. And let me tell you this. These people, when it gets to a point where you're not needed any longer, for example, they need a lot of people now for their workforce. But when they figure out mechanisms and all of this technology and you're not needed, they will figure out a way to get rid of you. Because they don't need to have all these people in the world now. The world would be better off there from their point of view with less people, easier to control, and now we have the mechanism there to do it. Our Luciferian government, our Luciferian world order. I don't know. Am I off base at all?
Well, I think you're right on, Greg, and you make a good preacher.
Yeah.
We're hearing something that's not coming from the pulpits, and this is really where the downsizing of America's. It's because of what's coming out of the pulpit. Nothing is coming out of the pulpit, and what has come across. I had a friend of mine, Mr. Pasco. He lives in Pasco, Washington, and he sent me an email and said, "Listen, you got to listen to Greg Samansky's week there starting on December 7th there."
Mm.
And I didn't listen. And then all of a sudden, he wrote me another. I talked to him one day. He said, "Have you listened to that?" And I said, "No." So I took the time to listen to those 5 broadcasts. And I'll tell you, when you start understanding it, I want to get into it a little bit more, but the mark of Cain, once you get into the understanding and you see all the evil, listen, man, they're turning up the dial on evil in this country, in this world as we speak.
Mm-hmm.
But once we understand, it gives us some peace. In other words, I think you're absolutely right, Greg. We need to share this, and I like to ask questions now. I just ask a simple question. Have you ever heard of Charles Carroll? Have you ever heard of the Spanish Armada? Because you have to. I heard this last night on a broadcast. You have to respect people where they're at. You cannot overload and dump, because it turns into fear. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It turns into FUD.
Right.
And, I want to make just a little quote here from the book The Sovereignty of God by author Arthur W. Pink. Just one sentence. He starts out with the introduction. He says, "Who is regulating the affairs on this earth today? God or the devil?" See, God is still the commander. I'm not going to take time right here, but God is still he's the one that is regulating this. God is still sovereign, and God's got His elect people, and this makes people run. See, I really feel that what's been revealed to myself, Greg, it's been revealed to us. It's been given to us. Now, Greg has the option of just ignoring everything and not saying another thing about it. sometimes I started this broadcast a week ago, and I've had some weak knees. I've had some weak knees, but, it takes me back to the first time when, on your broadcast, you said, on Friday we're going to have a different show here. On every Friday we'll interview a guest, and the first one's going to be Walt Stickel. And, gosh, when you said Walt Stickel, I took a walk to the beach, and I said, man, he used my name. He used my name. In other words, that shows you, I'm illustrating that everybody, you have to respect somebody where they're at, because we haven't got any history.
Oh, exactly.
And Greg mentioned this before. He said, in other words, you look at 1776, and all you have to do is ask the question, who benefited?
Exactly. And let me make one little point here to people who doubt this. When I said the Vatican and our government worships Lucifer and the UN is nothing but a Luciferian organization, check that out. But what that means also, if they do that, if they do worship that, they do believe in God. That is the key to this story. They do believe in God. Now, how many people out there don't even believe in God? They want you not to believe in anything. Now, the point is, even our enemies, and I call them an enemy only because they're enemies of God, they believe in him. They just have chosen to go a different path. And that's been spelled out in the Bible, I think. And I just wanted people to be clear about that. So you're dealing with people that understand these things. They've just taken a different way. And it's not the right way, I don't think. Go ahead, Walt.
Well, that gets into, we're going to be covering this in the future broadcast, but it's Arminianism and free willism. You see, in elections, I think, Walt Stickel, I was just a common person. I've been a pilot, I've been a truck driver, used to keep honeybees, and all of a sudden, and the biggest attack that I've had is always, it's from within other Christians. This when you start mentioning the founding of this country, your biggest enemies are going to be inside the evangelical Christian world.
Okay, the show with Walt went on for about another 20 minutes because he's got a longer broadcast than I do. And so I wanted to say it was kind of a changeover. There were some little glitches there because I'm simulcasting that as well. But I hope you enjoyed it. You can go to his broadcast. Just Google Walt Stickel, S-T-I-C-K, I think it's E-L or L-E. And you can find his website as well. Glad you listened. I changed the side of the microphone today, but hope you enjoyed it. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.